Madina Alam, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Just hanging out, doing my thing. We're here on the podcast. We're here to talk about some mental health. I feel like transitioning into 2024 because it's needed, right? And all that
Mhm.
other good stuff. So, speak a little bit about your background when it comes to mental health and the things that it is that you do.
Sure. Yeah. I've been a therapist for about 7 years now. Currently specialize in anxiety related disorders. And I'm very passionate about teaching individuals how to actually find a therapist. I don't think that there's a lot of good knowledge out there on like how to find a therapist. I think, a lot of times we say therapy is really important and we should go to therapy, but I think we don't we're not really taught like how to find the right type of therapist. So I really specialize in, teaching people that, but also just a more behavioral approach on treating your mental health. I think a lot of times people think of mental health as like you go and you talk to someone, which can definitely be part of therapy, but I do think there should definitely be a behavior component to therapy as well. Um, so yeah, I don't know exactly what to say in a concise way. There's just like a lot that has gone into the last 7 years. So
7 years, 7 years of you studying and things like that. It's the same thing with me, podcasting. You know what I mean? I think
nice.
what it comes down to is how we, how do I say this, navigate through the thing called the world and our journey
Mhm,
and how
mhm.
we end up helping, the individuals that we encounter and things like that. For you, when we think about your life, right, what are some ways that you've used your teachings to become better?
Yeah, so I love this question just because I think part of why I love the type of therapy I do so much is because I really believe in the things that I'm teaching individuals. So I'm a firm believer that how you respond to anything is how you respond to everything. And I also think discomfort and uncertainty is your best teacher. And so I don't know, I'm like, how personal are we getting so early?
We can
But
get in. We're getting in. You mustn't. You're familiar with the show. You're pretty sure you know what goes on here. How we give it up. We get to the deep stuff.
yeah, I think, being, vulnerable and open about things that you've gone through, I think can be really helpful for other people to hear. So I'm definitely willing to, talk a little bit about it. And I've talked about this on some podcasts, but last year I had actually got diagnosed with, have you ever heard of Rhabdo?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Speak to us about
So
that. What is that?
basically, you can get it in a few different ways, but the way in which I got it was I basically worked out too hard, and my muscles broke down so much that they went into like proteins went into my bloodstream, and basically what happens is that area of your body will swell. I had so much swelling in my arms. I literally had 12 pounds of swelling, and I'm like a fairly like small individual, so I looked like Popeye for all intents and purposes. I couldn't use my arms. I could barely drive myself to the emergency room. Um, and I wasn't even going to go, but I wound up going just because when I called the doctor, he said that that was an emergency if my arms were swollen and to go. So um, basically, the condition, you can die in a couple of days from it just because you basically go into kidney failure. And so it was honestly a pretty scary experience for me. I had just moved to North Carolina at the time, so I didn't have a lot of supports here, have any family here or anything. And it was just, for what you could imagine, it was just like a very scary experience mentally and physically. Working out is like my number one love and my passion. And so not only like seeing my life kind of like flash before me, if you will, but also like being like something was kind of stolen from me, right? Like I had a recovery after. I still think about it. Like I will never do pull-ups again, probably, just because that's the exercise that caused the condition. So I try not to be too long-winded with the story, but it was just a good example of leaning into a mental discomfort that I had not experienced. I was very familiar with physical discomfort. I was an athlete. I did bodybuilding for many years. That's the whole, you know, reason why I loved working out was like pushing yourself to that physical limit. And then on the other end of this, it was like the opposite. It was like learning to not push myself, which was uncomfortable. And then also kind of addressing the mental consequences that I had from it because I was having like some trauma symptoms. I was having nightmares. I was having like bad memories. So I had to kind of work through the mental discomfort of that as well.
There's a lot that's there, right? Because
I
just in
know.
that
I wanted to
journey,
pause because I was like, I don't want to overwhelm you with too much info at once. But
come on, come on. Information changes situations. Have you ever heard that before?
no, information changes situations.
Mm-hmm.
I like,
Changes situations, right? So I feel like something that I do very well on this show is I give the guests that ability to speak, right?
yeah,
But then also to bring it back down to where we now, how do I say, we flush out all of what you've said, right? Because it's all
yeah,
for learning for the audience and things for like, for myself
yeah.
also too. So what comes up for me is, was there an element of fear that was there as far as like what was happening, how my body's changing, and like what are the steps that you did to come out of that fear?
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of fear. Was having when I left the hospital, I was having a lot of just anger, and I'm not an angry person, and so it was like a new, like unfamiliar feeling for me. And like I mentioned earlier, I was having these nightmares of, quite frankly, beating up the person who put me through the workout. And a lot of people like laugh when I say that, but like for me, it was like a really distressing dream just because I'm not like a violent or angry person. And so like it was hard to have those dreams. They kept happening, right? And I had to stop and ask myself, what would I tell one of my clients? Because I deal with this day to day, right? How do you approach fear? And I was talking to my mom on the phone about it, and she said, Medina, you're standing up for yourself more in your dreams than you are in real life. Not obviously that I would go beat up the trainer, but that I would address with him, like, all the stuff that's coming up for me. Again, it's not even just the fact that I physically could have died, right? This is a very serious condition. Um, but that like mentally there are so many things I will always have to deal with. It's been over a year and I do not feel like my arms are back to 100% as they were. I won't do pull-ups. I get scared every time I do push-ups. Like anytime I'm in a hot yoga class, I'm checking my arms to make sure they're not swelling again. Like, so basically, what I did was I asked myself, what was I scared to do? And I said, I'm scared to have a conversation with him. And so I told myself that's what I have to go do. So that day, I literally just went to his studio. I didn't even know if he was going to be there. I didn't know if he'd be available. Um, and he was there. He happened to be available. And I just kind of aired my grievances. And before I had gone, I was like, what's the point of talking to him? It's not going to change anything. Like, it's not going to change the fact that this happened or anything like that. But I'm so glad I went because what do you know? After I had the conversation with him, I never had a dream again of, you know, beating him up or any like trauma like dream. So it was really just like me leaning into the fear that I had versus trying to run away from it.
Love that you say that, because it's always an element that I say is we have to make peace with our past, right? That doesn't
Mhm,
mean past in childhood. It could be
mhm,
past 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks
mhm,
ago, a month ago, so on, right? And we carry so much, like you speak of, anger when it comes to maybe somebody that's done us wrong. Could be a past relationship, family, friends, right? And
mhm,
not many of us want to address things in the moment. That's why something I've learned in the retail background when I was working for Apple was feedback in the moment, right?
mhm,
And I think that a lot of people hear that and they don't want to, how do I say this, give the feedback in the moment because they're afraid of what the consequences and the repercussions could be. Well, you speak
mhm,
to your trainer, you say this, hey, listen, this is how it made me feel at this present time. It's like, oh, okay, well, is there going to be a shouting match? Well, you come to me, you should know the A's and the
mhm,
B's and the P's, and things like that. So I like that you show that wholesome side of yourself that you can at least step up no matter what. If it's not in the
mhm.
moment, sometimes those are the things that we have to, what do I say, the pre jitters, we have to get out of our system, and things like that. So Happy that you done that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love the way you say it that too, just because it really what it is we're trying to avoid something that's uncomfortable, right? We're scared that that conversation is going to be uncomfortable. And really the only thing that we can do as humans is to lean into the discomfort that's inevitable in life, right? Because before going, like I was already uncomfortable. So like I could go and then maybe still be uncomfortable, or I might potentially end with like a different result. And so I think it's just a good example of why discomfort is important, right? I don't love that I went through that experience, and I'm sure anyone listening has an experience that they don't love that they went through, but it's taught them a lot and it's made them who they are. And it's also something they could never avoid. Like no one has ever had a life where there hasn't been a moment like that. And it's all about how we respond to it.
I hear you. So when it comes to stress, right? Speak to the audience. How do you
Mhm.
deal with stress? And really deep dive of like the audience, because I have a female base, I have a male base. How to deal with stress, and what does it mean to you, and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I think the best way to deal with stress is to lean into it. I think a lot of times, especially nowadays, I think we over pathologize things that don't need to be pathologized. Stress is, again, it's inevitable part of being human. And I think, the more you lean into an emotion, the more manageable it becomes, which sounds ironic, right? I think the biggest thing I teach people is to allow anxiety and uncertainty to be there, because usually when we're trying to not have anxiety or stress or uncertainty, that is when it becomes more forefront. Um, it's kind of like, do you want to try something with me really quick?
Do it
Okay, close your eyes.
on my show. Close my
Yes.
eyes.
Well, I'm not gonna. We're virtual. I
You
can't
can't
do.
do you can't do really much, but like you say, close my eyes. Like okay, close
It'll
my
be
eyes.
real brief.
Is there
I promise.
is like LeBron James gonna pop up on my screen or something like that? Okay, close my eyes.
Okay. And I want you to think of anything but a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant, whatever you
Wait, I'm
do,
gonna
not the
open my
color.
eyes now. I'm gonna open my eyes now because this is impromptu, right? I want people to realize this is what we're getting into. If you're listening to the show, if you're watching the show, this is impromptu. I'm not gonna be thinking of any pink elephants. That wasn't even on the top of my mind. So close my eyes.
We did the exercise though already. Did you think of a pink elephant
No, I didn't.
at all?
No. Why would I think of a pink elephant? That was on like not even on the top of my mind.
Because I told you not to think about it,
And I said I wasn't gonna think about it.
but it popped into your mind.
Because you said it. Oh, I see what you're doing here. Uh-huh.
Yes. So I'm trying to give an
Mm.
example. Do you get it or no? Do you want me to explain it?
No, I get it. I get
In,
everything you're saying. You're clever.
are
You're
you not a
smart.
fan of the exercise?
No. I'm starting to understand who you are. It's get it. I get it though. It's all in love. It's all love. Straight up.
Yeah. No, I mean, the reason I do that exercise with people is because the more we try not to think about something, the more it becomes forefront. So you're asking me how to deal with stress, and I think the irony of the answer to that is it's to allow stress to be there because it's part of being human. I think like as a therapist, like I approach a lot of things when it comes to feelings in a probably a non-conventional way. I don't want to understand why you feel stressed necessarily. I want to help you manage it. We could sit here for the next 60 minutes and ruminate on why you feel anxious today, or try to figure out why you feel sad. Or we could get up and do the thing that you're avoiding. Or we can get up and call your friend, or like, let's not lay in bed all day, or like, you're scared to get in your car and drive. Like, let's get in the car and drive. And so basically, I think the best way, like I said, to deal with stress is to let it be there, but not let it impact your physical behaviors.
Hmm. Did you always want to be a therapist? Because that's the vibe that I
Mm-mm.
get, and I say this with a lot of respect. The vibe that I get, that's not. I feel like that wasn't your calling.
Yeah.
Is that what you always wanted
That's a
to be?
very no. So I actually Right before I decided to go to grad school, I switched to be a mental health therapist. I was going to be a lawyer.
Bam,
I
got
always
it.
wanted to
There you
be like
go.
a
Bam.
judge.
Bam, got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. So here's
um,
why I say this. Here's
but
why I say this. Here's why I say this. See, because I don't know how much you know of me, right, or know about like my
yeah,
background, but I have a life coaching
uh-huh.
perspective. So when I'm hearing you talk, I'm actually putting the
Mhm.
P's and the Q's together, and I realize I'm like, she don't want to be she never wanted to be a therapist, but she fell into that, right? I
Yeah,
instantly said, no word, dead ass. I said, lawyer. You give me lawyer vibes because you have that little piece
yeah,
of you that wants to like not say you challenge, but you have a debate side to you. There's a little piece in there
yeah,
that I'm sensing. So
yeah.
shout outs to you. I want to say that to you.
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely very challenging. I say this to my clients. And I think one of the reasons, if I'm going to be 100% transparent, which I think can be hard sometimes as a therapist, just because I think people expect you to kind of like be perfect or to be like, oh my God, like all I want to do is like help people and like empathize. And like, that's just not me. I think I'm a very challenging therapist with so much love and compassion because I know that challenging people can put them in a place that's going to be very beneficial. Um, and so I think part of the reason I'm still a therapist is because of the type of therapy I do. I probably would have floundered years ago if I didn't find this type of therapy, just because I'm not the type of person that's going to be empathizing with you for 60 minutes. And part of that is because if you actually look at the research, that doesn't help people. I think there's a small amount of that that is helpful, right? You want to validate someone's experience, but also like how many times can we validate an experience before it starts to just like be a circle that we're continuing to kind of fester in, you know?
Yes. Now you come into my wheelhouse because I'm all about this, right? You do it in the 9 to 5, you
Yeah.
do it in podcasting. I know, my mouth sometimes goes a mile a minute and, the offense, people get offended. It is what it happens. I feel like what what
Yeah.
what you say and how it lands for me is that we can't always have the cookie cutter type of approach when we're doing
Hmm.
coaching or we're wanting to help people, right? And we're not going to be for
Yeah.
everybody, right? Some people you can't
Hmm.
take them by the hand and walk with them. Sometimes you just got to take
Hmm.
two hands and push them into the deep end and say, hey, listen, swim, but I have the SOS here ready for you, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
when you're dealing with your clients, right, and you're working in their practices and things like that, when,
Hmm.
if it's a man or a woman that comes and they meet you for the very first time, how do you distinguish who you're going to work with and how they can actually relate with you and your teachings?
Yeah, I think I just like a lot of transparency. I think as therapists, we're taught maybe not to be transparent, but I think it's so important. So I always, in my first session, I'll let them know like you'll probably experience me quite different than any therapist you've been to, and that's because I want to help you. And although at times it might seem like I'm being really crass, it's probably because whatever you're struggling with, right? Because typically I'll treat an anxiety disorder. So, say I'm treating someone with OCD, if you ever perceive me being an a-hole, it's probably because your OCD is trying to overtake the session. And I want nothing more than for you to run the session versus your fear to run the session. So, and because the whole point of a therapist is the therapist models how you should be with yourself. And so I try my very best, and I'm not perfect, but to balance compassion with encouragement, right? I think it's not compassionate to not push someone. That's going to keep them stuck, right? And I don't want to push them into the water without the SOS button you're saying. So I think like I just like to be transparent about how I am. And, as far as who works with me, I think, you said something earlier that I resonate with so much. I'm not going to be a good fit for everyone. So I do say that as well. I say, if you don't feel like this is a good fit, like I want you to have an experience that you feel like is most beneficial. I don't even want to say that you'll enjoy because I don't need my client to love me. I want my client, and I think that's hard for a lot of therapists to admit because I think a lot of us do get into the fields because we want to help people, we want people to like us. But like I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, I don't need you to love me or like me. but I need you to think what I have to give you is worthwhile and life
Mm,
changing, right?
mm.
And so, I say that as well.
I like that you say that because it kind of comes through the lens for me, where I say one of the biggest prerequisites, if people really want to learn about life and coaching and how to become better, the simple production I would say is watch Michael Jordan's The Last Dance that came out, 10-part episode. A lot of people say
Mm,
that, oh, Michael Jordan was an asshole. But if you look at what Michael Jordan was always preaching and talking about, was being one better within yourself and his teammates. And he brought that out of you. He did it
mhm,
with Steve Kerr. He did it with, Phil Jackson. Scottie Pippen kind of had a little bit of it, but then he tapered off. But what it is I'm trying to say is that I think if we, and I get it, we're in life is different. If we start really self-reflecting of what growth
mhm.
development really looks like, you sometimes got to rip that goddamn band-aid off. And so many people are so
Yeah.
hypersensitive. Well, guess what?
Mhm,
Rory, I don't want to do this. Medina, I don't want to do that
mhm,
because the fear of.
mhm,
You got to sometimes embrace that fear. You know what I mean? Like I watch horror movies. That's my stick. But then I know folks,
mhm.
right, that are close to me that can't watch horror movies because guess what? They haven't ripped off that band-aid yet. So they don't have that inner
Yeah.
about themselves. And that's not a diss, that's just reality. So I watch that stuff and I'm just like, whatever, I go to bed and I'm good. It doesn't create any problematic situations for me. You know what I mean? But some other people like this the whole entire movie or they have the sheets over their head all night every night. You know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
how you look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think really what you're saying is you've exposed yourself to something that could traditionally be scary. And the only thing that can make any of us less scared of anything, or the only way we can make something more manageable, is by continuing to do it over and over again. And the big difference between someone who's able to make progress and to manage their mental health and someone who's not is the person who manages their mental health does not wait to feel like doing something. And I don't know how much you've watched my page, but I talk about this all the time. I will scream it from the rooftops for the rest of my life. I tell my clients this almost every time any of them meet with me is I don't, and this is going to be really unconventional. And I joke with my clients to say, I do not care how you feel. And people will be like, what? A therapist is saying that? The reason I say that is you can't control how you feel. If we could control how we feel, none of us would ever feel sad. We would never feel anger. We would never feel guilt, right? We would always just feel happy. The only thing you can control is the way you respond to the feeling, right? It goes back to the story I was telling you in the beginning. I couldn't control that I felt angry, but I could control what I did with that anger. And so I think, if you don't feel like doing something, you will stay stuck forever. And that's kind of what you're talking about with like ripping the band-aid off. Like I can be the best therapist in the world and give you the best skills to help you. But if you're not going to actually like put them into practice, like you're not going to get better. And I think sometimes people are waiting for someone to kind of like fix it for them. And that might be the unpopular opinion. But if I don't tell that to my client, then that they will stay stuck forever. Because like even if I can't follow them for the rest of their lives either, right? No one can get you out of whatever you're stuck in other than you. There's people there to help and support and to validate, but that's only a small part of it.
Well
I get
said.
like super passionate about this stuff. I'm sorry if I'm like hot, like coming in hot, but it's just like
Why
it's
are you apologizing on the podcast that does this on the regular? This is the reason why I've been doing
yeah,
this for the last 7 years because, like I said, is we
yeah,
don't cookie cutter, we don't bullshit here. We give it to you raw, right? If you want to go listen to those other shows that are going to give you the fluff, go right ahead.
yeah.
You're you're good, but you kind of do it a little bit better here in development, always, right?
Love it, love it.
So, because there's a part you said about how much I watch your page. See, you gotta. This is where I have my skill set here. This is where things get kind of development. So I find it interesting because you say how much I watch your page, and the thing is, you have to go through the research. So you have an idea, right? You got to know how to scout. You got to know how to vet who's coming on the show, right?
Mhm.
So we had a conversation where you also not only do this, you do modeling also too, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yep.
Okay. So when it comes to that, you're you're a therapist, you're a model.
Mhm.
Speak to
Mhm.
best of both worlds. And how do you balance both of those worlds?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this last year has been like a huge development for me because I feel like for a while I was just very confused because it felt like those things were so different and really they're not at all. I think a big part of my job as a therapist is to build confidence for people and to help them feel confident, right? And that's what when you help someone eliminate or manage fear, you increase their confidence. And for me, modeling is about confidence in what I like to do. So for a lot of years, I used to model a lot when I was younger, and I stopped for many years because um, I was having people like saying like preconceived notions about me, like, oh, I'm full of myself, or I'm so cocky, or like all the things you would think that people would say about like models or preconceived notions. And for me, like I love like teaching. I love mental health, obviously, all these things. And so that's when I kind of like stopped and like just really delved into, I guess, like the corporate world, if you will. And then I remember the last like year or so, I told myself, I was like, no matter what I do, people are going to have something to say. And so I might as well do what I want to do even if people have something to say. And so I kind of balance it with like understanding both worlds are about building confidence. And then I think the other piece of it for me too is as I've developed into the therapist I am today, it's this realization and this desire for people to know that your therapist is a human too. In my I work for a company, and part of what I do is sometimes I have to look through the feedback that clients are giving the clinicians in our network. And I'm sorry, some of the comments are actually really frustrating for me to hear from these clients. Like my therapist yawned. Um, Again, this might be unpopular opinion, but your therapist is a human. You're not like I'm not reviewing that feedback. Your therapist being 2 minutes late, and again, this might be unpopular opinion, but your therapist is probably 2 minutes late because they haven't peed in 4 hours, right? And so it's this idea that your therapist is a human too. I'm someone who that's a hobby for me. I like creating art, you know and so I think that was like the other piece of me really just coming, and even like some of the stuff I share on my page now, some people as therapists would be like mortified. Oh my God, you showed 2 inches of your stomach. And I'm like, at the end of the day, like I'm a human. And if someone doesn't like that, then they don't like that. So yeah.
So yeah, see, there's a lot of spice here now because see, I could take this in like so many
There is a
different
lot of
directions.
spice.
A lot of spice. But we always want to protect. I always say, as I like to protect the guests and
Yeah.
protect myself, right? Because it's the most important thing.
Mhm.
So we're in social media land, right? And again, we're
Mhm.
not for everyone. You know what I mean? I've said this.
Mhm.
Prior to us recording this, I did an episode that released in so many different parts where I speak about this, right? Where we're not going to be for everyone. We're going to perceive us differently
Mhm.
and all this other crazy stuff. But for you, you talk about social media. As a therapist, there's so much information that's out there, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
could list a laundry list of names of the ones that have the credentials and the ones that are trying
Mhm.
to regurgitate the same talking points to perceive and to give the information of like it's their own. Social media, we all do it, right? It is what it is. When it comes to social media, you're a therapist. There's a lot of other therapists that are out there that may regurgitate other talking points from other content creators that are psychologists or therapists. How do you bring your flair into social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you do your postings, LinkedIn, and not make it sound like you're regurgitating other talking points from content creators? And at the same time, you have a unique approach to delivery with how you want to connect to everybody.
Yeah, I think so much like self-help out there is kind of like that sugar-coated stuff that you were kind of speaking to, of the stuff that the fluff that people want to hear. Which again, I think I'm sure a lot of people don't want to follow me for this, but I think what makes me stand out is that I have these beliefs about what therapy is and how to make changes that are a little bit non-conventional. Like a lot of times people are like, you sound like you're torturing your clients. And it's like, my sessions are hard. Like people don't leave sessions with me like butterflies and unicorns. They usually honestly don't want to come. They tell me that. And honestly, that's how I know that I'm doing good work with them, is because if they wanted to come, we wouldn't be making the changes that we need to make. Like think of like you go to a personal trainer. Most people aren't like, I'm so excited to go work out. They're like, oh God, like how many like squats are they going to make me do? Like this is going to be challenging. Right. But that's like why people get better when they go to a personal trainer, because they're physically doing the thing that's scary. They're not talking about working out, they're doing the workout, right? And so I think, a lot of the content I put out is just spewing out knowledge on like how to properly treat a lot of these disorders, and just being niched. I think a lot of therapists, like when we graduate from school, you can technically treat anything. So I could put on like advertisement for myself that I treat bipolar, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, depression, anxiety, like I could hypothetically say that ethically. I can. But is there any way I'm a specialist in all those disorders? No. And so I specialize, and I think, that's how I try to make my content unique.
Love that you say that. You say strong
Yeah.
personality because you know I was going to go there, right? Because you said it. Trust me.
Yeah.
Intentional listening over here. So,
Hmm.
how does having a strong personality weigh the pros and the cons of how people perceive you now?
Whew. So having a strong personality, I think, is it transparently is very interesting for me, because I know that I come off very confident, but anyone who knows me knows I'm actually extremely self-conscious. And so that's part of why I model. And I've also started learning dance recently, and my bodybuilding history, all of that's been done in efforts to try to build my confidence. I think my demeanor sometimes makes people have preconceived notions about me. And so I think it is hard to be vulnerable about the fact that I'm really not as confident as people perceive me to be, because they think I'm like fishing for a compliment. But something kind of like I was saying earlier that I want everyone to know is we're all way more alike than we even realize. Like people look at someone based on like how they present themselves or what they look like or what they have in their life, and they think they have these ideas of them. So I think having a strong personality, like a pro and a con, is that like it I do think I'm articulate, and people listen when I talk, but also I think people then have perceptions of me that aren't very accurate, that maybe feel like they can't relate to me. And so I try to talk about it as much as I can about especially I think for women, like we can feel very self-conscious for a lot of reasons, just the way societally, not saying men don't too, but I think I can only speak from a woman's perspective. Um, that it can just be hard to feel confident in who you are.
So, you're big into yoga, right?
Hmm.
I like that. I like that. So, how do you use yoga to transform the power into mind for you?
Yeah, yoga. I love yoga. I love working out. I feel like working out and yoga is like just like a good microcosm of the real world, in my opinion. Like I think it's so much more than just like what it looks like on the surface. um Kind of like I was saying earlier, I a firm believer on like how you respond to anything is how you respond to everything. And so when it physically becomes demanding or mentally demanding or challenging when you're working out or you're on your yoga mat, like how you respond is everything, in my opinion. And I think it just like builds like such good character, because the act of working out takes a certain level of like discipline and determination that I think is important for any of us to manage, like just life in general. um and I think this last year, in relation to my story of being hospitalized, I used to always perceive how you respond is like you got to push through the challenging things, which definitely has its time and place. But I also think that this year, my motto has been slowing down is the real flex. Just because I think we're in a society where we're always like, go, 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 push, push, push. Like think of like diets. Like people are like, I'm going to cut sugar out for 365 days. And in my head, I'm like, why? Like that's just so extreme, right? Or like every once in a while, I'll go to like a workout class, and I'm just like, some workout classes, I'm like, why are we working out this intensely? Like we would just be better off like walking more throughout the day. um like work, right? Especially with like virtual work now, everyone is like, let's work till 2 a.m. and then let's talk about it as if it's a flex. Like, yeah, I was on the computer till 2 a.m. and I'm like, that is not a flex, right? I was at Run Club the other day, and I knew I should walk, right? I had already worked out that day. I really just went for the social aspect of it, but I'm so competitive and I want to run, right? And I don't even like running, right? I'm just competitive. And so I said to my friend, I said, should I walk or run? And he's like, you should definitely run. And I said, what if I told you it would be mentally more challenging for me to walk? And he just looked at me and he's like, touche, right? Because I think sometimes we forget that, the response isn't always pushing through. Sometimes that's actually the easier decision, right? Um, and I think sometimes slowing down can actually really challenge you. So I think working out just gives us so many opportunities to teach ourselves like such like cool lessons, in my opinion.
Love that you say that, because working out is everything. You know what I mean? I know a little bit about that.
Mhm.
Like my past life was being a personal trainer. So I get like the whole component of when you were speaking about, you know, as a trainer, taking care of your clientele. And I know a lot of trainers don't do that, because a lot of trainers are very just like cookie cutter, stitch it together type of thing. You know what I mean? They have
Mhm.
all this
Yeah.
information, but a lot of them don't use the information that they've learned from the book and bring it into building the right relationship and asking the right questions when you go into your one-on-one conversations. Get what I mean? Before the person even steps
Mhm.
anywhere into the
Yeah.
gym, you know? So
Yeah.
same thing with yoga. Like yoga is such an art, for I would say even mind.
Mhm.
Like I've been a big component of hot yoga. Like hot yoga is probably one of, for me, I like it because what it does, it puts your mind at such a next level ease that if you do it early in the morning, you
Mhm.
come home, you take a nap, and then you just continue back your day. You know what I mean? And all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yoga has I always say you leave yoga feeling a little different if you're following like the instruction of like the breath part of yoga. Because when you're using, they call it the ujjayi breath, which is like that, deep breath that you hear people in yoga doing, and that's what activates your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's why people leave yoga feeling kind of like a little bit different. Um and yeah, I think it's just, again, so many, like I'm also like really into hot yoga, and I think what I love so much about that setting is because it is so hot in there, it forces you into this position where you're like uncomfortable, right? Like I'll be in class and I'm like, I want to leave. And I think such a good thing yoga has taught me is that you don't need to fix something that's uncomfortable. And you'll stay, you can choose to stay in the class even though it's physically and mentally uncomfortable, and see that that discomfort does eventually go away, and then it comes back, right? Maybe 10 minutes later, you went through another hard portion of the class and like the discomfort's back and you want to leave again, and then you choose to not try to fix it and you stay and you realize you can get through it, right? Like I feel like life is such an ebb and flow of like learning to ride the wave of uncomfortable things that happen to us. Like, anytime I treat depression, for example, it's like people are like, well, going to have dinner with my friends or doing this only helped for a little bit. And it's like, well, nothing is going to help indefinitely, right? It's just taking it moment by moment and trying your best to manage with what you can versus trying to fix, right? I think that's a big issue we have in general in societies. We're trying to fix things. And it's like, there's no fixing that needs to be done. There's only managing. in my opinion. And I think that's what we get sucked into. And that's why there's so many like quick relief things that people do that are unhealthy, like drinking or making poor decisions or, overeating. Those are quick fixes because they do in the moment temporarily alleviate you from that discomfort, but long term they're creating all this other stuff for you.
Do you think you said something there that came up? Because I see a lot of high success leaders now are starting to pick up the practice of not drinking, not doing drugs, especially the not drinking part. But I always say is drinking is based and it's also subjective, right? I feel like if you have a wine here or there, or you have a whiskey or a mixed drink once in a blue moon, right? It's not going to do anything to alter.
Mhm.
But I can see why some people kind of cut it out completely so you don't have the temptations, right? Because some of us are not mentally strong enough to be like, hey, like, listen, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that, right? Because it's even hard enough to do it with eating. You know what I mean? You want all the sugary, the salty snacks and things like that. When you're in your practices, and I know this is going to be subjective, this is going to be based. How do you feel about drinking? Do you think some people should maybe not drink to really tap into their inner self a little bit more?
I think if you have an issue with alcohol, it would probably be very beneficial to abstain from it completely. If you're someone who doesn't have an issue, I think, I'm on the bandwagon of everything in moderation. I think if, what again, tend to do, I think as societies, we tend to overshoot in the other direction, which then eventually causes us to then overshoot in the other direction. Like the sugar example, like if you tell yourself no sugar for 30 days, you're probably at some point going to wind up cracking and then eating all this sugar. And then it kind of like throws everything out the window that you were trying to accomplish, right? And the goal, I think, as being a human is not perfection, right? If you're someone who just like doesn't like alcohol and like that's something that works with your lifestyle and you want to abstain from it, I think that that's great. And if you're someone who wants to have a glass of wine on the weekend, I think that that's great too. I always look at things as far as like how it interferes with your life. I think drinking is always a tricky one in the sense of like, I hear this all the time. People are like, oh, I only drink when I'm out with friends, so I don't have an issue. Like that means nothing, right? It's the intent behind the behavior, right? If you're drinking to a point that for you is interfering with your functioning, then that is an issue. It doesn't matter if you're having one drink or five drinks. For some people, having four drinks doesn't interfere with them at all. So keep going. You know what I mean? So I think it's very, having a conversation with yourself on like what your goals are and where you're currently at is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we get out of here, I think one of the last questions I want to ask, and I feel like you're going to take us home with this one, is, the power of negative
No pressure.
thoughts. Oh, no pressure, eh? All right. So maybe I should just
Okay.
rechange this on the fly. You know what I mean? But speak to, right,
No,
from
I feel pressure
where's the pressure?
on the screen right here. I don't know if you're going to be up here or where you're going to be, but
We're playing Brady Bunch now with the boxes, ladies and gentlemen. Now we dancing. That's crazy. That's crazy. But no, all jokes aside, how do we destroy negative thoughts in our brain? And give us 3 examples that people should do to eliminate negative thoughts out the brain. Take us home with this one.
So I think firmly that happiness is a choice. And so I think choosing what you want to focus on, choosing like why you can be happy is important. I used to hate this like idea because I think it's been around for a while. Like, oh, you can choose to be happy. And I'd be like, I don't know if I like that. But for whatever reason, the last couple of months, I feel like I've really like subscribed to it just because if you think about it, like you can never let your happiness be contingent on something because you'll never feel happy. There's always going to be a reason to feel unhappy. And so you can just decide that, right now is happiness, it's positive thoughts. think that's one way to go about it. I think the other thing that I always like to remind people is, again, you can't necessarily control your feelings or your thoughts, but you can control your behaviors. And so if you find that you're having a lot of negative thoughts, it's probably because your day is full of negative behaviors. If you're waking up and laying in bed for an hour and scrolling on social media, and then you get up but you don't even brush your teeth, or you don't shower, and then you don't really talk to anyone all day, and you binge watch something on Netflix, like, I'm willing to bet your thoughts are going to be pretty negative that day. So if you want to reduce that, I would say get up immediately when you wake up, shower, get ready, talk to your friends, use your five senses to engage in the day. Like, when you eat your sandwich for lunch, like, are you actually eating your sandwich, or are you, somewhere else in your head, right? So I think that that's important. And then I think the last thing is, negative thoughts or uncomfortable thoughts are normal. And it kind of goes back to this idea earlier that I was talking about of over pathologizing it. Like, none of us are always going to have joyful, lovely thoughts all the time. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of times we make things worse by trying not to have like uncomfortable situations. Like, you're going to have days where you're a little more negative. That's not bad, right? Those are just days where you learn more about yourself. You learn the things that are triggering. You learn that you're human, right? Those are the days that are going to make you most relatable to other people, right? How many times have we had a day where we're not feeling well and we reach out to a loved one and they're also not feeling well, and then you guys make a connection and a bond over that. So I think the last thing is to just normalize that you are going to have negative thoughts.
Well said. Well said. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
This is not the only first time this is happening. There's got to be a part two.
Thanks for
We're gonna
having
turn
me.
it. We're gonna turn it into a debate, though. Don't worry. We're gonna turn
Yes.
that into a debate. You know what I mean? Because I think that there's a lot that you wanna. There's a lot you wanna uncover, and I'm here for it. You know what I mean? I champion it and all that good stuff. But where can everybody check you out?
So you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is at mentalhealth_Madina_. And I just had a really good time chatting with you today. And yeah, if anyone does follow me on Instagram, feel free to say hi.
Perfect. And I appreciate you.
Okay. Appreciate you.